It's really hard to be mad at season 1 episodes of Gumball.
A little bit faster.
They have this level of charm that would be slowly pushed out as the show went on. So I'm not mad at all, just disappointed. Also look at my Twitter. So in the 7th part of the Search for the Worst Gumball episode series, we have The Kiss, which features Granny JoJo. To prepare you for this, I want to state a fact here. The previous 6 episodes I reviewed in this series have all been requests. These were the episodes that you guys suggested to be talked about in this Worst Search series. This is one of the 2 episodes in the series that I'm inserting myself to talk about. And this is the lighter of the 2 episodes that I don't really like.
Richard, those go in the trunk.
Huh? What does it look like I'm doing?
That's the gas tank.
Nicole's reaction to Richard seems to really vary throughout the series. Certain times she seems completely over him, other times she's pretty much in on a laugh, but here, like in The Hero, it seems like she really doesn't want her kids to laugh at him. I'm assuming it's because she thinks it would lower their perceived respect of Richard, but I don't agree. I think it's just because they found it funny and they love him regardless. But it is funny to see the thought process of trying to fit a suitcase into a gas tank. Now to be fair, Nicole and Richard play a minor role within this episode, both telling their children to love and give Granny JoJo everything that she wants, but also at the same time, leaving before she gets here, showing a clear sign that they want nothing to do with her. Can I also just take a minute to appreciate the rougher, unpolished aesthetic of Gumball Season 1? They've definitely become a lot more polished as time went on. But there is something about seeing these realistic trees alongside a clearly 2D character and everything, it just seems to fit so nicely. So in this episode called The Kiss, what or who is exactly kissing what in this episode?
Give Granny JoJo a kiss.
Well, it's a simple kiss. On the cheek, right?
Come on, Gumball. Just get it over with.
Well, it's easy for you. Hurry up with those bags, Anais. I don't want to miss the Sheriff McGruff marathon.
In this Search for the Worst Gumball episode series, I've talked about episodes that simply confuse me more than annoy me, like The Worst or The Laziest, where it's honestly just tiny decisions that make a big impact. I've also defended The Girlfriend, a generally hated episode, and lambasted The Parents, a generally liked episode. I feel like a lot of people perceive critics that have really strong opinions either way. Either I must blindly praise or harshly criticize a work, and there's no in between. Well, chuck that rule out because I don't hate this episode nor dislike it to the point where I'd have the energy that I've had in episodes like The Heroes, The Others, or The Parents. This episode is meant to be uncomfortable. The idea of your grandmother kissing you on the lips is not one that most people really want to think about. This episode seems self-aware about this, with anticipating the eventual kiss when Granny JoJo applies lipstick or lip gloss, I really don't care. However, the episode also attempts to alleviate the cringe-inducing thought by building a funny story behind and around it. But what happens when you don't really find the story that funny?
You okay, buddy? Ah, look out!
You kind of just find it, I mean, it's not horrible, but it's not great. But why I'm disappointed in this, and why the title is that way, is that I personally enjoy a lot of the humor of Gumball, particularly Season 1. I love the dress, I've spoken about it before, and even though the thought of Darwin having multiple kids with Gumball is also a thought that no one should think too deeply about, the execution there worked because it was over the top, cartoonishly exaggerated to the point where everything about it was ridiculous. Plus, it was funny. Or how about the regular show episode Brain Eraser? In that episode, Mordecai sees Pops' junk mail, leading into him actually having to track down the thought and remove it so that he can actually function as a Blue Jay again. I love that episode, and I don't think that episode was cringe-inducing either. What those episodes do right that this episode didn't do right to me is that, like with Squirrel Jokes, the underlying truth is a little too exposed here. Like with that episode and how I just didn't like how Sandy was treated like that and had to do some pretty humiliating things just to get people to understand her message, here, there is no over-the-top, push to the max character-driven sort of style that would appear more in the later seasons. This is actually an episode about an actual cringe kiss that actually scarred a character and actually has to really get that fix in order to function, with very little over-the-top about it.
Here you go.
Thanks.
And because I don't find it funny, it misses the mark for me and feels discomforting. But at the same time, I can also see people really not caring too much about the kiss and thinking that the execution was handled well. However, what I don't see much is how funny or endearing this episode is to other people. When people talk about funny, they generally don't look at the kiss, so I can speculate that a lot of people may have found this to be just okay, even good, but not great or laugh out loud hilarious. Seriously, when people think about funny, The Amazing World of Gumball episodes, have you ever heard the kiss in that conversation? Me neither. To me, this is decent at best. The jokes such as Gumball seeing the kiss everywhere as Darwin tries to help Gumball find his happy place is just fine. But other times, like when Gumball goes into a field of flowers and says that the smell reminds him of Granny JoJo, I didn't really find it all too funny because the episode never made it clear that she smells like that. It just seems like a random thing that they put in because they didn't have any idea how to transfer from one scene to another. I know that Nicole and Richard don't like her and that Anais goes out of her way to do what she says, but what she smells like? There's also the joke of Gumball blowing up at a random talking squirrel and they just cry.
It's no happy place!
Really, that's the entire rest of the scene. Which would lead into me believing that this is more story than comedy. And I try not to be too definitive in what I say because context does exist and matter, but I would much rather Gumball to be funny than tell a cut and dry story. Think about what It's Pony, Craig of the Creek, Ollie's Pack, and The Loud House are doing. Gumball should not be doing that. Gumball should be pretty away from that. So what is left would be trauma therapy. At least that's how Darwin explains it. I also enjoy the aesthetic of a lot of these older characters, like how Penny looked before her transformation, and that's not even talking about what happened in the shell. Or how Molly is allowed to exist still, and that's a character for a whole nother different video. The second half of this episode is at least better because it has more action. We see Gumball go through lots of horrible things just to see if he can out-trauma his recent event. I like how we see a lot of these characters get into these actions as well. I think that was a good touch. However, like with the general problem of this episode, it just seems too small, which is pretty odd. The Amazing World of Gumball should be a loud and big show, unlike other shows that I'd say should be a lot more close and personal, like Hilda or Summer Camp Island. However, if these episodes were this subtle going forward and this is what they thought that the general vibe and atmosphere should be, I would have lost interest in the show, mainly because with so many different personalities and so many different designs and a character who would be built to go through much worse pain than this episode doesn't feel amazing. It doesn't feel like it belongs in an amazing world. It doesn't feel like a Gumball episode. It feels rather plain, but it's even worse because of the main section of it, the kiss. Granted, this is season 1, so I'm a lot more forgiving, and the weight of a lot of these criticisms are actually a lot lower than, let's say, a season 6 episode where they've had 5 episodes to know better. Of course, Gumball forgets for now, and we get to my personal favorite joke revolving around this episode.
I carried your suitcase up to your room.
Oh, well, good for you, dear. Now bring it back down. My bus will be here any minute.
Which ironically seems to be the loudest and most blunt joke in the episode, which helps my point here. When Gumball is trying to be slow, soft, and quiet, episodes like these don't benefit because it's just not absurd enough. I feel as though the idea can work, even though I'm not too crazy about Granny JoJo, but this review was super important in the worst episode saga, despite being much shorter than the other ones. Do note that I don't dislike this episode greatly, it's just that the reason I dislike it is entirely different than a lot of the other episodes. The girlfriend, the hero, the worst, the others, the parents, they were very loud, very emotional, and in your face about what this episode is about. However, I would much rather episodes be like that than this. This episode ends with Gumball essentially being kissed on the lips the exact same way, which is a bookend. Yay!
Give me a hand with this bag. Okay.
I know it's the aesthetic of season 1 to have a lot more unpolished episodes, have the characters act more like naive children, and overall be a lot more innocent. But with concepts like this, the show would have kissed itself goodbye very early if it didn't adjust into the brute, mega, blunt, and in-your-face show that we all know and a lot of us love. Special thanks to the supporters of May. Make sure to follow me at my Twitter, the AlphaJayShow. And if you want to see more of the Search for the Worst Gumball episodes, click this video right here. If you have a suggestion for the Search for the Worst series, let me know in the comments down below. And until next time, take care. Alpha out.